Chapter 4. A Peasant Tool. Vanmark mud was worse than Alderfall mud. Soldiers had organized it. They had dug ditches to make more of it, churned roads through it, marched in it, until it became a brown paste that swallowed bootlaces and dignity. Then built an obstacle ground beside it so recruits could fall into the same mud from greater heights. Brom hated it on principle. The camp itself seemed built to prove that misery could be planned. Tents stood in rows so straight they made the surrounding hills look untidy. Latrine trenches had little numbered posts. Cook smoke rose from pits arranged by company. Even the piles of broken gear had assigned places. Each mound tagged with chalk marks no one could read once the rain started. A man could trip over a rut, crack his teeth, and probably be told he had done it out of formation. Bram had never seen so many people pretending the weather took orders. Intake had given him 3 things: a gray blanket that smelled of old smoke, a tin cup with a dent sharp enough to cut his thumb, and a wooden tag stamped with a number instead of his name. The clerk asked for his family house. Bram said Alder. The clerk asked for a proper house. Bram said Alder. The clerk asked for a proper house. Bram said the roof leaked on the north side if that held. Then the clerk asked whether he had a sign. Bram had thought he meant scars. He lifted his left hand, where a pale line crossed the knuckle from a hatchet slip 2 winters ago. The clerk looked at him, as if he had tried to pay tax in pine cones.
Gift sign: hearing, flame, shaping, mending, sight, warding, blessing, other.
No.
Any family record of gift?
My aunt can find a rotten onion in a full bin.
The clerk did not write that down. Behind Brom, a boy in a cleaner coat said his mother had water calling on feast days, and his great-grandfather had once made frost climb a window in summer. The clerk's voice warmed by half a degree. A second mark went beside the boy's name. Not proof, not power. Just possibility. And possibility was apparently enough to be filed with care. Bram left the intake table with his number tag knocking against his chest, and the strange sense that the army had looked through him for a door and found only wood. The other recruits had begun deciding where he belonged. Not with the nobles, obviously. Not with the blessed. The chapel coals had sat dead under his hand. Not with the trained common infantry who at least had been issued weapons the army liked. He was becoming a kind of camp object, the boy with the axe, the woodcutter, the ox, the joke that had not yet learned when to stop being useful. That morning he had decided the wall would settle it. He should have known better. Walls did not settle things. People built them so settling could be delayed.
Alder, you waiting for the hill to bow?
Bram checked the wall in front of him. 16 feet of wet logs, pegged badly. The left side had better grip, but too many boots had polished the lower holds. The right side had a split near the 3rd peg. Rotten? No. Just dark with old water. He could use it if he did not trust it. The other recruits looked at the painted arrows nailed along the side. Left hand there, right boot there. Pull, step, climb. The arrows were not wrong. Exactly. They were a path made by someone who had never climbed after a trapped boy in sleet. Never gone up a pine with a rope around his waist while a half-cut trunk groaned below. Never followed a squirrel track high enough to learn which branches lied about holding weight. In Alderfall, climbing was not an exercise. It was work refusing to stay on the ground. The recruit beside him, Dane Morrow, leaned close enough to smell like onions in fear.
Careful, woodcutter! Wall's made of your cousins!
Bram looked at the mud around Dane's feet.
Move your left boot.
Dane blinked.
What?
The whistle blew. Dane stepped, slipped, and went down before the first peg. Bram climbed, not like the others. The others grabbed where the wall told them to grab. Bram used the pegs. Yes, but also the cracks between logs, the rope knot someone had left too low, the slick corner where his shoulder could press while his boots searched. He did not pull himself up so much as argue with gravity in short, rude sentences. At the top, wind cut through his sweat. Below, recruits cursed and scrambled. The drill master's mouth had gone flat.
They say it ain't down.
Bram dropped to the far side, rolled with the ground, and came up running toward the weighted sledges. They were meant for teams of 2. He took one harness, leaned forward, until the strap bit across his chest, and pulled. For 3 strides the sledge refused. Then it moved. Mud sucked at his boots. His thighs burned. Splinters from the harness edge scraped his neck raw. He counted breath instead of distance. 1, 2, 3. The way he counted axe strokes in winter when his fingers went numb and stopping meant no firewood by dark. Halfway down the lane, the sledge's left runner found a stone hidden under the paste and kicked sideways. Bram let the harness drag him with it for 1 step instead of fighting. Fighting a jam too early snapped ropes. Wren had taught him that by making him replace a snapped rope with his own supper money. Bram shifted his hip, gave the sledge an ugly little circle, and used the sideways pull to free the runner. Someone near the rail said.
He saw that.
Someone else said.
He guessed.
Bram did not have breath to hate either answer properly. The lane rose at the end. Not much. Enough. His calves turned hot and hollow. In the village, he would have shortened the pull, stopped, wedged a block, rested the rope, gone again. The army had made the trial a straight line. Straight lines were easy to judge and hard to live inside. He kept pulling. Everyone was watching, and falling short would be taken as truth, not weather. Someone shouted behind him. Not mockery this time. That was almost worse. He reached the marker post, turned the sledge badly but turned it, and dragged it back with spots flashing at the edges of his sight. When he crossed the line, he did not fall. Falling would have pleased too many people. He bent over with both hands on his knees and spat mud. The drill master walked around him once.
Strong.
The man said. Bram's chest lifted despite himself.
Undisciplined. Ugly. Wasteful. If I wanted oxen, I would requisition oxen.
The recruits laughed, grateful it was not them. Bram stared at the ground. His boot had sunk half an inch deeper on the right than the left. Bad drainage under the obstacle line. He noticed that instead of the heat in his face, footing first, shame later.
Again, and this time try looking like a soldier.
Bram looked at the wall. The wall looked back, wet, and stupid, and honest. Dane was still scraping mud from his chin when Bram returned to the starting line. The boy gave him a sideways look, less amused than before.
You always climb like something's chasing you?
Usually something's falling.
The better or worse?
Depends where you are.
Dane considered this with more seriousness than it deserved.
I prefer being chased. Falling things lack manners.
The whistle blew again before Bram could answer. He could beat it again. That was the problem. Beating it did not seem to matter. No one called it that. Officially, it was a gift assessment. Unofficially, Everyone stood straighter when the blue-robed chaplain came out with a copper bowl and a little cage of white ash coals, so Bram called it a chapel line in his head and kept his mouth shut. That was a new skill. He disliked it. One by one, recruits placed a hand over the bowl. Most got smoke and disappointment. A few made the coals brighten. One girl from the river counties made the ash lift in a spiral around her wrist, and the chaplain's face softened like she had become someone's answer to prayer. The line changed around her. Before the coals lifted, she had been a thin common girl with a patched collar and mud on both knees. After, a clerk hurried over with a dry cloak. A sergeant who had ignored her all morning asked her father's name. The chaplain touched 2 fingers to her brow and murmured something about the gift. Finding low doors as well as high ones, Bram watched her face while everyone else watched the ash. She looked terrified. That was the part no one blessed aloud. Divine favor did not make a person larger. It made every eye in the yard decide she had become useful in a better way.
Divine favor.
Dane muttered, rubbing mud from his jaw.
Better than onions and fear, I suppose.
Bram glanced at him.
I fell once. Let it die.
You fell before the wall.
Let it die faster.
The chaplain called Bram's name. Bram put his hand over the bowl. The coals did nothing. He had known they would do nothing. Knowing did not stop the silence afterward. It was a small silence. Barely a breath, but it measured him. Human. Common. Ungifted. Useful only if someone needed a body to stand where better-marked people could spend their miracle carefully. The chaplain waited a little longer than he had waited for the boy before Bram. That was supposed to be kindness, too. Bram felt every extra heartbeat like a hand pressing his head under water.
Sometimes the gift comes late.
2 places down, someone whispered.
Not that late.
Dane coughed hard enough to cover half the laugh and none of the meaning. The river girl with the lifted ash still stood near the clerk. Dry cloak around her shoulders, eyes fixed on Bram's hand. As if she wished she could give him some of what everyone had just taken from her. That made him look away. He did not want her pity. He did not want her fear either. She had gone from nobody to asset in the space of a breath, and Bram could not decide whether the army had rewarded her or put a brighter mark on her back. The chaplain touched the rim of the bowl.
No shame in being ungifted. The divine asks different service from each hand.
Bram looked at his own hand. Swollen knuckles, split nail, old scars, new blisters. Different service was one way to say it. He felt the chaplain trying to be kind. That made it worse. Cruelty had a handle. You could grip it, pull back, say something sharp enough to cut your own mouth. Kind disappointment slid off the hand. It left him standing under the open yard with his palm over dead coals, and his blisters suddenly more visible than they had any right to be.
No sign.
The chaplain said, not unkindly.
I've signs.
Bram said before sense caught him.
Blisters, mostly.
Dane made a strangled sound. The chaplain did not smile. After the assessment came the weapons yard. That was where Bram saw the sword girl. He did not know her name yet, only that her practice coat fit too well and no one laughed near her. A lesser noble by the way recruits made space. But officers did not quite bow. She stood inside a chalk circle while a training mage across from her lifted 2 fingers.
Valakor, ready?
She inclined her head. The sparks snapped from his hand, bright and blue-white. Bram flinched before he could stop himself. So did half the yard. The spark was not large. That was what unsettled him. It did not roar like stormfire or crack like a tree hit by sky. It came thin and exact. A line of light with no interest in being impressive. The training mage's lips moved around a prayer Bram could not catch. The chaplain, standing near the rack, bowed his head, as if even practice sparks deserved manners. Magic, Bram was learning, was not treated like weather here. It was treated like a guest from God who might burn the tent if offended. The sword girl moved less than a handspan. Her blade came up, not slashing but turning, catching the spark along the flat. For an instant the steel hummed. Lines etched near the fuller glowed like banked coals. She stepped, grounded the point in wet sand, and the spark died with a hiss. No panic, no wasted motion, no prayer Bram could hear.
Show off!
Bram watched the wet sand steam around the sword point.
No, that was real.
The word tasted unpleasant, as if respect had been forced between his teeth. The mage sent another spark. This one bent at the last instant, curving toward Valakor's shoulder. Bram expected her to chase it with the blade. She did not. Her front foot changed the angle of her whole body. The sword turned with her. Not after. Steel met light where the light was going, not where it had been. Bram knew that kind of timing from trees, cut where the weight would fall, not where it stood pretending. The spark hissed down into the sand again. Blessed steel, a recruit muttered. Blessed hands, another said. Kale Rusk, near the front, said quietly.
Practice.
The word had no ornament on it. It reached Bram. Valakor heard it too. She did not look at Kale, but her grip settled by the smallest measure, as if the word had been a nail tapped home. The sword girl looked over then. Not at Dane. At Bram's axe. Her gaze touched the nicked head, the reset wedge, the mud on the haft, and then Bram's face. She did not sneer. That would have been easier. She looked as if someone had brought a shovel to a church service and expected the altar to make room. An officer clapped Bram on the shoulder hard enough to make the assessment cut on his palm sting.
If you want to survive,
The man said.
you'll learn a proper weapon.
Bram looked at the sword point cooling in the sand. For the first time since camp, he could not make himself call that stupid. Camp made cold into a rank. The upper tents near the chapel glowed blue at the seams after dusk. Hearthstones sat in iron cradles there, humming softly while noble trainees and gifted recruits dried socks, warmed hands, and pretended warmth was discipline rather than privilege. Their coats came back from wash lines cleaner than weather should allow. A purification charm snapped over their sleeves when they passed the chaplain's boy, lifting mud in pale flakes that drifted away like the world had agreed not to cling to them. Bram watched from the supply yard with water inside his left boot and a strip of stale hardtack softening miserably in his mouth.
Don't stare! You'll make the warm people uncomfortable.
Good?
Worse, you'll make yourself colder.
Joran Hale crouched beside a crate of boot nails, counting them into little piles. His fingers were red at the knuckles.
If either of you has spare complaint, put it in the broken strap basket. It's overflowing, but that's true of everything here.
Bram swallowed the hardtack. It scraped all the way down.
Do blessed recruits fix their own boots?
Joran looked toward the chapel tents.
Blessed recruits are tactical assets.
Dane held up a boot with the sole half peeled away.
My left foot is also tactical. If it leaves, the rest of me goes with it.
Write that in a petition.
I would, but my hand's frozen into a claw.
The supply yard had become a small nation of broken things. Boots with mouths. belts without buckles, cloaks torn where men had caught them on cart hooks, sword scabbards warped by rain, bowstrings gone slack, wagon pegs, tent rings, split spoon handles, cracked buckets, 2 helmets with dents shaped like bad decisions. Common recruits sat on overturned crates and repaired what they could, before officers noticed they had ever been issued anything fragile. Bram had been given a leather needle and told to stitch a strap on a pack so old the leather had turned the color of dead leaves. He had fixed it. Then Chorin's glove, then a wagon brace no one had technically asked him to look at. The longer he sat there, the more things arrived near his feet. No one said please at first. Then one older infantryman dropped a cracked shovel haft beside Bram and muttered,
If you see sense in it.
Bram saw sense in it. The haft had split. Someone had carved across the grain to make it fit an iron collar too small for it. He shaved the swollen edge, wrapped the split with wet rawhide, and set it near the fire pit to tighten.
How much do you charge?
For what?
Becoming the patron saint of handles.
Soup with something in it?
Ambitious.
Across the yard, Cale Rusk stepped from a better canvas tent carrying his own practice coat over one arm. It was not dry. Bram noticed that first. Resentment liked facts. Cale's cuffs were damp, and one glove had been darned carefully enough to hide the repair from anyone who did not know what repairs looked like. Cale saw Bram looking and lifted his chin by half an inch. Bram looked away first, annoyed that the truth was less tidy than his anger wanted. The noble tents were warmer. They were not paradise. That irritated Bram more than if they had been. It would have been easier if every person behind blue-warmed canvas had been laughing over honey cakes while common boys chewed stale hardtack in the rain. Instead, he saw Saren carrying her own water bucket from the pump. Her family name did not lift pails. Saw Cale trade half his better ration for a strip of clean binding cloth. Then pretend he had dropped it when a younger recruit needed it more. Privilege was not simple enough to hate cleanly. It only made the unfair parts harder to deny.
Alder, over here.
Called a voice from the ditch road.
You swung an axe before, yes?
Once or twice.
Dane said under his breath. A military engineer in a waxed coat stood beside the flooded crossing that linked the supply yard to the wagon line. 2 planks had already cracked across the middle. A third sagged under its own damp weight, while 3 common recruits argued over whether to blame the wood, the rain, or whoever had ordered a bridge built out of soaked misery. The engineer pointed at the stack of replacement timber.
Cut that one to length.
Bram walked over, took one look at the timber, and did not lift his axe.
No.
The engineer blinked.
No.
That one will split.
It's the right length.
Length isn't strength.
Dane made a reverent sound.
Put that on a noble banner.
The engineer frowned at the plank.
The wood is sound.
The wood is angry.
Wood is not angry.
Bram crouched, ran his thumb along the grain, and found the pale compression line near the edge.
It was cut from a leaning trunk. See this? Weight sat here while it grew. You lay it flat over water, put wagon wheels on it, and it remembers leaning. Splits where you need it least.
The engineer's mouth tightened.
And you know this from…
Trees?
Joran coughed into his fist.
Trees don't issue certificates. Neither do cracked planks.
Dane made a small choking sound that might have been prayer. The engineer looked at the flooded crossing again. A mule team waited on the far side, harness bells dull with mud. Behind them, 2 wagons sat loaded with tent canvas and sacks of meal. Men stood in the rain. The bridge had failed, and standing in rain was what happened when someone upstream decided wood was only length and width.
If this is wrong, the wagon goes into the ditch.
If that plank goes in,
Bram said, nodding toward the one first chosen.
the wagon goes into the ditch after looking official.
For a heartbeat, the engineer only stared at him. Then Dane whispered,
Promotion by ditch prevention. Historic.
Bram moved to the stack and rolled another plank with his boot. He rejected 2, then stopped at one that looked worse to the eye. Darker, a knot near one side, end grain uneven.
That one, it's ugly.
So am I. Still here.
Dane nodded gravely.
Unfair to the plank, but true.
Bram set the plank on the chopping blocks and trimmed one end, not square but angled. The axe bit clean. He took a shallow wedge from the underside near the knot, then shaved a strip from the high edge, until the plank sat with its weight pulling inward instead of down.
You're weakening it.
I'm telling it where to bend.
Planks don't listen.
Bad ones don't.
The first wagon crossed at a crawl. The plank dipped. It did not crack. Bram walked beside the wheel, one hand hovering near the side rail, though there was nothing his hand could do if the bridge failed except be crushed with conviction. He listened instead. Wood spoke best when it was nearly too late. A high tick meant splitting. A low groan meant bearing. The plank groaned. The bank groaned. The bank brace shifted, then caught.
Keep left.
Bram told the driver.
Road's there.
The driver snapped.
Waits here.
The driver glanced at the engineer. The engineer, to his credit, swallowed whatever answer Pride had prepared and said,
Do it.
The wagon kept left. The second wagon was heavier, loaded with tent poles and sacks of grain. Bram stood close enough to hear the fibers complain. The knot took pressure. The whole bridge settled with a wet groan and hell. No one cheered. Soldiers did not cheer for a bridge unless it failed under someone else. But Joran let out a long breath. Dane slapped Bram's shoulder and then pretended he had only been reaching for a nail. 2 recruits Bram did not know stopped looking at the axe like it had crawled out of a barn. The engineer examined the plank again, this time with less impatience.
Useful.
It should have felt like a compliment. Then Lieutenant Harker passed on the ditch road with 2 officers from the warmed tents. He took in the bridge, the axe in Bram's hand. Before
Clever for a woodcutter.
Harker said, and kept walking. Dane's hand fell from Bram's shoulder. Joran went back to counting nails. The engineer's jaw shifted. For a moment Bram thought he might say something. Not an apology. Men with waxed coats did not seem practiced at those. Maybe a correction to Harker. Maybe a second useful. Instead, the engineer bent over his notes and wrote the plank length in a little book. That was the Army's talent, Bram thought. It could turn anything into ink except the part that mattered. Bram looked at the blue glow leaking from the chapel tents. Then at the plank holding the wagon road together. A village had taught him that ugly wood could carry weight if asked correctly. Respect, he decided, could still sound like an insult when it came from warm hands. The mess line had 3 smells. Stew for officers, soup for trained soldiers, hot water that had been threatened with turnip for everyone else. Bram stood in the 3rd line with Dane and Joran, holding his dented bowl and trying not to stare toward the officer pots. The rain had paused, which only meant the camp had time to steam. Mud steamed. Men steamed. Wet wool steamed. The whole valley smelled like a boot someone had tried to cook.
If I become gifted tonight, I want my miracle to be gravy.
Joran peered into his own bowl.
Aim higher. Salt.
Salt is too holy.
The first line moved under canvas. The second line moved under a patched awning. The third line moved under open sky, which had not yet filed a complaint. A kitchen boy carried a covered pot past the common line toward the officer table, and the smell that escaped it made the whole row lean a fraction after him like grass and wind.
That smells like meat.
Could be mushrooms.
Don't ruin my faith.
Bram watched a chaplain's assistant set 3 little hearthstones under the officer kettles. Blue light gathered in the iron rings. No smoke. No damp ash. No coughing over green wood. The officer's stew stayed hot while the common soup cooled every time wind crossed the yard. A sergeant caught the common line staring.
Eyes in your own bowls.
There's nothing in them yet.
Dane said, quiet enough to remain alive. Bram looked toward the chapel tent. The river girl from the assessment sat near its entrance with 2 other newly marked recruits. Someone had given her a dry cloak and a wooden cup with a lid. She held both like borrowed guilt.
She looks miserable.
Dane followed his gaze.
Dry and miserable. A rare condition.
Everyone looks at her.
That's what happens when God points an officer's notice.
Joran lowered his voice.
My cousin had a listening sign. Could hear cracks in stone before a quarry went. His lord put him in mines until he started hearing things in his sleep and punched a priest.
What happened?
Priest had a soft jaw. Cousin had a hard sentence.
Did the gift leave?
Joran looked at him as if that was either a very stupid question or a very honest one.
No, that's the cruel joke. God gives men schedule.
The river girl laughed at something one of the chapel recruits said, then stopped the instant a clerk turned toward her. Bram saw the laugh fold itself away. He thought of a bird made to sit very still after everyone decided its wings were valuable. Blessed did not mean free. It did mean warm soup. The line moved. Bram received a ladle of pale water with 3 turnip fibers and 1 object that might once have believed in barley. Dane inspected his bowl.
Behold, the king's generosity.
Cale Rusk passed behind them carrying Officer Stew in a covered bowl. He saw their bowls. They saw his. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Cale said stiffly,
"This is for Lieutenant Var."
Didn't ask.
Cale's mouth closed. Bram expected him to leave. Instead, Cale set the covered bowl on a crate, took a strip of dried meat from his own ration pouch, and held it out to Joran. Joran blinked.
Is it poisoned with manners?
Almost certainly.
Dane stared at Cale.
Are we witnessing charity?
Cale's face went red in a controlled, noble way.
We are witnessing me needing you functional tomorrow, since you know where replacement boot nails are kept.
Joran took the meat.
A moving speech.
Cale picked up the covered bowl and left before anyone could thank him. Bram watched him go. Cale did not go to the officer table. He went to the far side of the medical awning, where Lieutenant Var sat with 1 boot off and his ankle wrapped. The covered bowl vanished into the tent. Cale came out without it and paused beside a rain barrel to rinse mud from his fingers. No one at the officer table noticed. That seemed to be how much of Cale worked. Visible pride. Invisible work. And a constant fear that someone would catch him being kinder than his station allowed.
Still an ass.
Joran tore the meat into 3 pieces.
Yes, but one with protein.
He handed Bram a piece. It was small, tough, smoky, and so salty, Bram almost closed his eyes.
Donut blessed. You get transferred.
They ate standing in the mud, the benches near the common fire already full. Across the yard, hearthstones glowed blue. Clean warmth. Controlled warmth. Warmth that did not need split wood, blistered hands, or anyone waking early to coax a coal alive. Bram thought of Alderfall's common hearth and Sella's roof, of every winter log stacked by hand. He looked at his soup, then at his axe leaning against the mess rail. The army could call wood old-fashioned all it liked. It still froze when no one carried any. After supper, the common line did not end. It changed shape. Bowls became wash duty. Wash duty became hauling water. Hauling water became chopping fuel for the fires that still needed honest flame. Hearthstones were too precious to waste on boys who slept 12 to a tent. Bram split the wet billets behind the mess pit, while Dane held each piece badly with his boot and Joran stacked the kindling by size.
Your village really did this every day?
Not with everyone watching like wood's a performance.
Everything is a performance if officers are bored.
Dane nudged a billet into place.
Careful. If you split that too well, they'll make you teach it to noble boys and call it applied rural violence.
Bram brought the axe down. The billet opened clean. Across the yard, blue light hummed without effort. Beside him, Joran warmed his hands over a small, smoky, badly fed fire someone had carried wood to. Bram decided that if the army wanted to call that lesser, the army could freeze intelligently. The fuel detail lasted until full dark, not that the woodpile needed that much attention. Common work expanded to fill every gap, noble convenience left behind. A hearthstone could warm an officer tent with a prayer and a clerk's signature. Everyone else needed split kindling, dry shavings, chimney stones cleared, ash hauled out, and someone awake enough to notice when wet pine smoked more than burned. Bram showed Joran how to shave feather sticks from the driest edge of a bad billet.
You're making it fancy.
I'm making a catch.
It has curls.
So does your hair. Neither is fancy.
Dane crouched beside them, guarding the tiny flame from the wind with both hands.
If this works, I'm declaring you gifted by the god of not freezing.
That's just a coat.
Then I worship coats.
The flame caught slowly, grudgingly, then found the shavings and climbed. 3 men from the next 10 moved closer without asking. One held out wet socks toward the heat. Another closed his eyes for exactly 1 breath, before remembering he was in public. Across the yard, the chapel hearthstones hummed blue and clean. Their little fire smoked, spat, and made everyone cough. No one moved away. Bram fed it another sliver of wood and felt, unwillingly, the shape of home in the task. Not comfort exactly. More dangerous than comfort. Usefulness. A thing his hands could do while his head failed to understand where it was.
Axe boy,
one of the grunts said. Bram looked over. The man nodded at the fire.
Good curls.
Dane made a solemn gesture.
His first command.
Bram threw a shaving at him. It missed, caught in the smoke, and burned before it hit the mud.